chairman of the Freedom Caucus. He's out in Arizona's 5th congressional district. Andy Biggs is with us. You know, I do understand that partisan observers have been invited in as they have had other recounts in Arizona, and that there's a lot of faith and confidence in the system, regardless of how this is going to turn out. Am I wrong in believing that Arizona is getting it right?
Well, certainly in the counting process, we get it right, Sean. Attorneys, partisan observers are allowed in. They sit there closely. They're not 100 feet away. You having to use binoculars. There's not barriers put up. They are there. They're witnesses from both sides, from all parties. Get to have people in there, lawyers and just general observers. In that sense, they're getting it right, and it's just taken slow. And this is probably a technology question for the Secretary of State. Why do we have technology that moves so slowly? But the transparency and openness is been good so far.
Okay, so where are we? Last night there were around 300, a little over 300,000 votes left. The president had made up more than half the margin so far. I understand that that the expectation is that they have not really started counting the day of votes and the day before Election Day that were handed off, mail-in ballots that people didn't send in on time, but they dropped off to make sure their vote was counted. Where do you see this coming out? I heard the governor actually, behind closed doors, might be telling people he thinks the president has a really good chance of winning Arizona.
Well, I do think the president has an excellent chance to win because what you have left is somewhere a little north of 225,000 statewide, but more than two-thirds of that's in Maricopa County, and also in many of the rural counties that support the president and came out in droves on Election Day.
And by the way, Pima County, which was expected to come in heavy Biden, Trump had a 52-48 advantage, I saw last night. In the outstanding ballots being sent in.
That's correct. Yeah, those ballots being sent in. There's 25,000 more ballots in Pima County, but the reality is many of these areas, whether it's the suburbs of the Phoenix metro area or in the rural areas, they were coming out almost 3-1 Republican to Democrat. They were coming out 2-1 Independent to Democrat, and day of voting independents are going to break the president's way. The 3-1 tail Republican to Democrats, that's going to break heavily the president's way. What you're going to see next, though, Sean, is going to be probably the vote of the central Phoenix area. That's going to be far more blue, far more Democrat than the suburbs and the rural areas that still have to report.
Yeah. Now, how do you see, when you look at what's happened in these other states and you see the absolute mess that's taken place in some of these states, what are your thoughts?
I think that definitely the media is protesting too much, saying that, there's nothing to see here, move along, move along. I think the president's exactly right. You have to go through and find if there was voter fraud, if there was voter suppression, if there was illegal ballot harvesting, if they're not following the rules, which we know they're not following the rules in some of the places you've iterated, those actually get to the election integrity issue, but they also get to skewing the election results. And so the president is right to say, look, we're going to have to pursue litigation here, and I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing some of this come up to the U.S. Supreme Court for
what is the remedy if the law says partisan observers are allowed to watch the vote count, but they're denied the ability to do so, and they're papering over even people looking in the windows, which I don't think you can see a lot anyway, but what is the remedy, and where does that remedy come from? Because you do have this whole issue of whether or not state legislators can determine that they don't believe that it's a fair count, and they have the final say, as I understand it, according to law.
Yeah, the Constitution is pretty clear that the state legislators can actually make that determination if they think that it's been hopelessly tainted, and they don't use the words hopelessly tainted or anything. So that can happen with the state legislature. And by the way, it's Republican legislatures in all of these states that we're talking about, whether it's Georgia, or North Carolina, or Pennsylvania, and Arizona. I mean, we're talking Republican in nature, so they could say it's hopelessly tainted. Of course, that would lead to further litigation. But the remedy is that the election officials that are denying this, the first thing that has to happen is those people need to be held in criminal contempt. The court has got to say you are violating the law and in a criminal fashion and haul them in. But that doesn't solve the election problem. The election problem may ultimately could be solved like in North Carolina, where there was fraud, and so they actually had to re-elect in that district. But
right.
We hope that doesn't happen. We hope that doesn't happen.